Okay, for this for this video, you need to be make sure you have your own blank piece of paper so that you can take notes. And this is for the intro to Java math. And so make sure you have your notes, have some kind of paper to write notes on, and we'll go from there. So first of all, we're going to discuss, before we talk about specific mathematical arithmetic operations, we are going to look at some numeric data types that we have. So there's certain types of numbers that we're going to be using. Now there's two main types of numbers, and that one is floating point data types. Okay, so floating point. Now what floating point data types are they are numbers, numeric data that is would be in the form of a decimal. Okay, so floating point, it's like a decimal point, so they refer to decimals. The first data type is called a double. We'll use that term a lot. It's more precise than the other one, which is a float. There's two floating point or decimal data types. One is called the double and the other is called float. And the main difference for our purposes is that the double is more precise. It takes up more space on the computer, but it's like the difference between like let's say 7.5 and 7.4 7, 8, 2. Okay, so obviously this is more precise than this one, 7.5. This one rounds to 7.5, but it's more precise than 7.5 itself because of the rounding situation. And as you can see, the double has more decimal points, and that's why it takes up more space. Let's see. And then we have integer data types. So integer, of course, are positive and negative whole numbers. Okay, no decimals, so positive and negative whole numbers. And then one is called a long data type, and you have an int data type, which is just integers, and a short, which is a short integer, and then you have a byte, which is your smallest integer. So basically these are in the order of how much space they take up on your computer. So a long is a longer integer, and I forgot to get the numbers that this covers, and then there's int, and then short, and then byte. So we are going to use in our class, we are using double and we are using int. We're not going to be using byte and short and long and float. Okay, so when you think of double, start the D for decimal. Okay, so doubles are decimals, and then int is short for integer, so whole numbers, positive and negative. So let's see, let's move on. So without arithmetic calculations, a calculation with Java is really always going to have two numbers, two pieces of numeric data that are going to be added, subtracted, multiplied, divided, or whatever. Okay, so you have so it's two at a time. So first of all, you're going to have an operand, a number that's called an operand, and then you're going to have an arithmetic operator. I probably should show you this right now. So you have an operand, and then you have an arithmetic operator. So it could be plus, minus, multiply, divide, and then another one that we're going to talk about later. And then you have another operand. Alright, so these are called operands. And then you're going to have some kind of result, or another word. Then you should probably write this down, is let's write down a return value. This would be a return value. And we'll talk about that word much more in chapter 2 as we move along. All right, so in regular math, in subtraction problem, this is typically called a minuend and a subtrahend. Well, we don't call them that in Java. We're just calling them operands. Every single one of them, no matter what the arithmetic operator is being used. So with division, you have divisor and dividend. Well, no, we're just using operand. So that's all we're doing. All right, so that's what these are. These are arithmetic calculations with two operands, and then between those is the arithmetic operator. Obviously, an arithmetic operator is a sign that, or a symbol that operates arithmetic calculations. So you have addition operator, subtraction operator, multiplication operator, etc., etc. All right, so move on, and we'll forget this for here. Okay, so now if both operands are ints, so both these, like all these three problems, if both the operands are ints, the result or the return value has to be an int. Okay, it can't be a decimal or a double, so it's an int. And so I've asked the class, okay, well then if this is the case, then what is 14 divided by 4 equal then? And so what happens is if you multiply or divide 14 by 4 and you use a calculator, you're going to get 3.5. But 3.5 is a double, so the result of 14 divided by 4, according to Java, cannot be 3.5. Now, if you were to do long division, so let's take 4 into 14. Well, so you're going to get a 3, and then multiply that by 4, and you get 12, and then you have 2. All right, so now if normally we add a decimal point and add zeros, but the thing is we can't have a decimal, so we just stop there. So 14 divided by 4, and don't tell your algebra teacher this or your geometry teacher, but 14 divided by 4 is really 3. It's not 3.5. Okay, because an int divided by an int has to be an int. If both operands are ints, the result has to be an int. And so here's kind of a mnemonic type saying to remember this, and there'll be the opposite. And so this is use the calculator, drop the decimal. Okay, I'm going to ask you to remember this one and memorize it. And I think it's actually on the test. So when you're dividing, or when you're doing arithmetic operations with integers, go ahead and use the calculator, but just drop the decimal. So in other words, you have 3.5 in your calculator or in your head, then you drop the decimal and you're left with the integer. Okay, so that's how it works. And so we demonstrate this in JGrasp, which I will not do. Okay, so I'm going to, for sake of time, I'm going to move on. Now these are problems that I had students do in class. So what would be good is if you tried these and see if you got the correct answers. I'll give you the answer. So go ahead and do them, pause the video, and then come back and check it out. Okay, so these should be the amounts that you have. So if you look at this, 29 divided by 5 is 4. I mean, sorry, 5. So that's 25, and then 6 is too high, so it's just 5. Or you can look at it like it's 5. I think it's 5.8. You drop the decimal, and you have 5. And 279 divided by 77 divided by 9 is 30. 4 divided by 11, you should have 0 point something something something. Drop the decimal, and you're left with a 0. And the same thing with this. 1 divided by 8, I think is 0.125, I believe. And so drop the decimal, you're left with the 0. Alright, that's how that works. Okay, then you have what's called a modulus, which is called the remainder operator. The remainder operator is actually a percent symbol. So if I were to ask you then, what is, if this is called the remainder operator, what is 14 modulus 4? Well, hopefully what you would do is you would look for the remainder. And so the remainder is going to be a result. You can do it a couple of different ways. Most of you can do it in your head, but maybe some of the problems you need to do by long division. So if you take 4 and divide it into 14, you get 3. And then you multiply and you get 12. And you subtract and you get 2. Now, as I said before, we normally put a decimal point and add zeros, but since we're looking for the remainder, we don't want to do that. So once we've done that final subtraction, then our result is 2. So if you were to do this in JGrasp, it would return the value 2. So the modulus is the remainder operator, so therefore that implies that you're going to have to do a division problem. So you can divide in the calculator and then work through that to get the remainder as well. So anyway, it's just the remainder. So the long division, which I just showed you, you can also use the calculator. So let's say that I had, let's say I had 30 modulus 7. Let's say you did the calculator and you went 30 divided by 7, and you got it's going to come up to be 4 point something something something. Okay, so again, these are two ints, so you would drop the decimal. So the division is 4. So 30 divided by 4 is, I'm sorry, 7, I messed that up, is 4. Well, then what you do is you take 4 times 7 and you get 28. Well, so you still have 2 left over in order to get to 30. And so that's another way you can use the calculator if you need to, but you're going to have to multiply in there and see how much further you have to go. Anyway, so that's modulus, and we will stop at this place for now. No, actually we're not going to stop. We're going to continue going on. I'm just going to pause the video. Alright, so you should, the last couple things we need to do here is you need to practice these problems. So go ahead and pause the video, do the problems, and then check back to see if you got the correct answers. So these should be your answers. So 4 goes into 32 evenly, so it's 0. There's no remainder. 7 times 2 is 14. You still have 4 more to go to get to 18. 6 times 3 is 48. I'm sorry, 6 times 8 is 48, and so you still have 1 more to get to 49. If you use the calculator for this guy, then 145 modulus 18 is 8, and if you take 8 times 18, gets 144, so you still have 1 more to go for 145, so that's the remainder. 3 modulus 5, so this is that kind of deal where you have the smaller number on the inside. 5 goes into 3 0 times, and you multiply those two, get 0, and then you subtract and get 3, and that's where you stop. So that's why that's 3, and then this is 2 for the same reason. We're going to go another set of problems. So the difference here is this is a mixture of division and modulus, and this is where sometimes students get mixed up. So go ahead and do this, pause the video, come back and check your answers. And then these are the answers here. So 5, and then 3, then 0, and then 0, then 5. So see how you did on that. And then the last thing we're going to do here is we're going to go to check out this JGrasp document. But go ahead and write this down. If at least, and what this should say is if at least one operand is a double, the result is a double. And so we say, or so actually just looking at the JGrasping, what happens is we have 14 divided by 4, which we had before, and we saw that that ended up giving a 3. But now notice that if we just add a 0.0 up here, so that means the first operand is an int, the second operand is a double, and since at least one is a double, then what it's supposed to do is do the decimal. And so you do the calculator and keep the decimal, and so that's why it's going to be 3.5. And so on here, our next mnemonic on this is that we use the calculator. Instead of dropping the decimal, we keep the decimal. Right, so that's it, and that's we'll stop right there.